Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. My guest today is Congressman John Shimkus. Mr. Shimkus has been a Republican member of the Illinois Congressional delegation since his election to Congress in 1996. He represents the Illinois 15th Congressional District. Congressman Shimkus is a member of the House Energy Commerce Committee and is chairman of the Subcommittee on Environment and the Economy. That subcommittee has oversight of key environmental laws and programs, has focused on the intersection of regulations and jobs, manages coal combustion residuals, and the long-standing challenge of storing spent nuclear fuel. Today we'll be discussing his congressional duties, his career, and his political future. Congressman Shimkus, welcome to Conversation.
Lee,
again.
Good to be with you.
Again.
Yes, sir.
So I said you're with the 15th, but you started with the 20th.
Correct.
And then you went to the 19th.
That's correct.
And now they've made you the 15th.
Yes.
Well, at least you're not at the top of the list. How many? There's 18 left now?
There's 18 total in Illinois, and the new 15th is a quite large
huge.
And changed.
It's like they caught your house and then went east.
Well, the studio's in Maryville, and even the studio is in a different congressional district. I'm across the street pretty much here in Maryville, and that's my congressional district, so the Illinois Highway is
so on this side of the street where we're located right now,
we're in the 13th district. The 13th district.
Oh, this is
Rodney Davis's new district.
Right. He's the new congressman who replaced basically Tim Johnson, right?
Correct.
Right. Although not really, because all the districts are.
That's correct.
Have a different land. Right. Every 10 years this happens. For those of you who don't know that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your political career, but before we get there, I just want to ask a few other questions. Recently, I was on the Poplar Street Bridge. I don't know if you've been on the Poplar Street Bridge recently or not, but
all the time.
It looks, when you look down at the roadbed, it doesn't look very good.
Right.
There just doesn't seem to be the kind of money available to do the kind of maintenance that IDOT and MoDOT need to do. Can you comment on why, I think that the United States is now collecting revenues of somewhere in the around $2 trillion. And I don't think that includes Social Security in that. I think that's just general fund money. How is it that out of $2 trillion that basic functions like maintaining roads, and Poplar Street isn't one of the worst ones, it's just a very heavily trafficked one. Can you comment on why?
Yeah, the reality is our road construction doesn't come out of general funds. It comes out of the Highway Trust Fund, which is paid for by gas taxes. And as cars are more efficient and get more mileage, you get less revenue. Also, the introduction of renewable fuels also impacts the taxing ability of the gas tax, because so that's the primary reason.
I see.
There are other issues also. We take money from the Highway Trust Fund to build bike paths. We've used it for economic development and planting of flowers and the like. As when times are good, you can do more. When times are tough, I think just like any business, you have to go back to, well, what is the core competency of why do you have a highway bill? You really have a highway bill to maintain highways
and build new roads.
You know, and we love bike paths, we love flowers, and we love all that stuff, but when in times of austerity, maybe it's best to make sure that our roads and bridges are safe and that we can ride on them versus expansion of other activities that comes out. So that's really the main reasons.
Where's this $2 trillion? It's not even I mean, we're collecting and spending $2 trillion, but in fact, then on top of that, we're spending an additional $1 trillion, which is then just being turned into bonds to be paid later, right?
Well, the federal budget, rounding it, is about $3.6 trillion.
3.6 now.
Yes.
I thought it was closer to 3.
The entitlements, the mandatory spending is about $2.4 trillion. So that's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest payments on the debt. Is $2.4 trillion. So $1.2 trillion is, in essence, the discretionary budget. Now that's gone down a little bit because of sequestration. But
pause there for just a second. You say that's sort of the not mandatory part, but that seems to be the area of government that government is supposed to actually do. Government is supposed to run the roads. Government is supposed to make sure that a certain amount of infrastructure is taken care of. Government's supposed to make sure that airplanes don't crash in the skies, therefore we need air controllers. Today, I know this is showing in May, but today is the 23rd of April, and I read in the USA Today, before we went on the show, that they're cutting back on the number of controllers in the New York area and LA, and I think up in Bethalto, aren't they actually talking about closing that tower?
Closing the towers, that's right.
Right. Any other towers that are going to be
Murfreesboro,
okay.
The one in Carbondale are all at risk of closures. Some are pending lawsuits because some of these towers have a joint funding agreements with the local communities because they don't really justify a total expense by the national government. A lot of these smaller towers really use their traffic controllers really for ground control. Mm-hmm. I've flown into Bethalto a couple times late at night. You're really guided in by the St. Louis air traffic controllers, and then in the evening there is no air traffic controller in the tower in Bethalto.
I see.
You just wire in, you turn the lights on, you land, and then they eventually go off. So,
but my point is that there are so many functions that government is supposed to perform, and yet these seem to be the things that get shunted aside as, and forgive me for saying it this way, but as we spend more and more on charity, as taking care of people who haven't got money, and we start putting money into their pockets at the expense of actually performing government functions.
Well, again, the budget being the mandatory spending, which we use the term mandatory because we have no control of the money that we spend.
Right.
It's
now, I understand Social Security is a
mandatory
paid for, but it's a paid for. People put their money in there.
Well, it's a transfer payment system established in 1933
right.
based upon premises of the longevity of the population, which has not been true. Right. So also, and Medicare is the same type of provision.
Right.
And then Medicaid is our health care program that we share with the state of Illinois. Those are mandatory programs that we that they're on automatic spending. In other words, we're trying to address those in our budgetary outlines, and that's about $2.4 trillion. And you add the interest payments on our borrowed money. Who do we borrow money from? We borrow money from individual citizens, and we borrow it from foreign governments and whoever else thinks that we're a good bet to lend money to, hopefully to get that return.
Our good friends, the Chinese.
Our good friend, the Chinese.
Right.
Good,
I think they're #1 right now.
They may, I don't know
and
what
then I think
country.
Canada's in there, and Britain is in there. But they're much less. And I just looked these numbers up. Britain and those other guys are much less invested. I mean, when you look at the Chinese, and then
we're very fortunate that the European economy is not in good shape, because what would happen if it was strong and vibrant, the money would go into the European funds. Mm-hmm. There'd be a chase for better return. They would ask if we needed to borrow money, which we knew. We cannot operate our government without borrowing money right now. That's a problem. Mm-hmm. So we would have to lend money at higher interest rates. We start chasing the rates a la Greece. Then you have a spiral out of control because you can't raise enough to pay the interest payments. So that's why the budget debate is critical in Washington. But you've highlighted it, that even though you've got the mandatory spending, I put it this other way, we're very close to now, the numbers have changed a little bit. There was a time in the last year's budget where we spend more in or about 33% of our spending, which is discretionary budget. We don't take in enough money to pay for that. And so the discretionary budget is the things you highlighted.
Yeah.
It's the Department of Transportation, it's Department of Defense, it's Health and Human Services.
Excuse me, but the Constitution, as it was written, seems to me that it was a mutual defense pact among the states.
Correct.
And an economic free market zone between the states. Okay, so that's our fundamental basic law right there. So defense is not discretionary.
Well, it is by definition of our budgetary. I mean, I understand you're talking theoretically, it's not, but in our budgetary process,
yes,
it is a process in which we authorize spending for the defense, and we authorize the spending of defense. The mandatories are in perpetuity authorized and in perpetuity spent. So that's why every year we have to authorize and appropriate the dollars for the discretionary part of the budget. Theoretically, you're correct. Constitutionally, the requirement is defend the country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's why you have a standing military force. But there is a debate about what size should that force be and what are our threats. And the military budget is 1/2 of that, 1/3 of the budget. It's 1/2 of the discretionary budget. So if you sequester, across the board, who gets the biggest whack will be the military, because this is the biggest part of the discretionary budget.
And yet that's a fundamental function of government.
It is, but people, good people, can agree to disagree how large the standing military needs to be to perform that function.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Do we actually need to be in Afghanistan
Correct.
helping those people to gain democracy, which
Right.
they don't seem to want?
Right.
I mean, I've heard that
Sure, I mean,
question asked many,
right.
many times.
Right.
So moving back to your actual duties in Congress, you are chairman of a subcommittee, and I read some of the things that you're working on, which I guess has to do with coal ash. And,
That's right.
But also the intersection of regulations and jobs.
Right.
Now, excuse me, several months ago, I think before New Year's, I was standing in a business, small business, waiting my turn, and it was very, very crowded. And I was standing up against the guy, and we got to talking, and it turns out he's some big-time manufacturer. I don't know what he manufactures, but he was talking all about it, and he's like got stuff going on in China and Malaysia and Vietnam, et cetera, right? And so, but he's not manufacturing here in the United States. And I said, you know, that the labor differential is really narrowing now. You could probably bring that back, and for, you know, your products would cost a couple bucks more, but if you put Made in USA, people would probably buy your products. Oh, absolutely, I understand about that. But it's regulations that are killing me, and therefore I cannot return here. What is, I mean, there are people right here in your congressional district. There are people who are not, who are in Mr. Davis's district, who are literally dying for jobs up in Alton, all the way to Granite City, down into the East St. Louis area. These all used to be factory areas from World War II on into the 70s. And now nobody can get a job or I shouldn't say nobody, but there are very, very few industrial jobs. They're all over in Asia. What can Congress do to change that? Long-winded question.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand the intent of the question, but the way it's stated is that we don't manufacture in this country anymore. We do manufacture, and there is actually a return of the manufacturing sector now to the United States. I think the biggest concern is, why don't we have people qualified to take the jobs that are out there? You talk to any manufacturer in any region of the state. My new district goes to Danville, it's in Effingham, it goes all the way down to Metropolis, and of course the Metro East area. And manufacturer will bemoan the fact that, one, people can't qualify either educationally or through drug tests or through criminal activities, or they don't have the heart to show up when offered a job. It is the strangest thing. And I think part of it's the federal government's problem, because we pay people not to work, and now we've started changing that. The weeks authorized for unemployment has gone down, and we will hope to ratchet that down, because as people get off the government dole, then they start applying for jobs that are available. So I think that's one. The benefit now in the country is the new natural gas boom or the fracking debate, because it's making the cost of energy so low that manufacturing is returning, because, you know, the business is going to do a cost-benefit analysis. I mean, these are businessmen. They're going to look at what can they sell their good for, what are the costs, where can they make a profit. We as a government have to say, making profits, that's okay. Good for you. If we tax or regulate their profits away from them, why would they create a job? I always like to say, if you want employees, you have to have employers. But Illinois is a perfect example of a state that's not friendly to business. And so even in our, you're talking about state of Illinois, Southern Illinois, not only do we have problems at the federal level on rules and regulations, regulations is a pretty broad term. It could be environmental regulations, it could be labor regulations, it could be, but the state of Illinois has to compete with the state of Indiana, the state of Missouri, the state of Kentucky, especially in Southern Illinois, and the worker comp rules in this state by themselves make it very difficult for any manufacturer to locate here. The ones that do grow, why do they grow? Because they've already invested so much in the infrastructure and have the plant and facility. But we've seen locally where even that doesn't keep people here. They'll close up production lines and move to other states. So you just have to be very, very careful.
You mentioned about young potential workers who don't qualify educationally to work for these businesses. I believe you were in Congress at the time when No Child Left Behind was initiated.
That's correct.
What was the purpose of making that bill law?
The purpose was if we're going to provide some assistance. Remember in education that you talked about the Constitution. Look into the Constitution, see where it says that it's the national government's responsibility to support and fund public education. It's not in there.
No.
We have historically evolved through creating a Department of Education saying we want to be in assistance too. Just like we said, the Department of Energy, we want to be in assistance too. And I think some people would then argue we're more in the way than we are being helpful. But that's the current world in which President Bush, 43, found himself in. And the whole No Child Left Behind was to say, if we're going to be a partner with public education, we want to make sure that there is a return on that investment through a focus on higher test scores. Well-intentioned, 3 problems. One problem is eventually that went to 100% had to get approval. I mean, had to get improved. And we know, knowing human nature and kids, that not everybody can improve. Well, you can, but under the system of testing. People who had English as a second language were thrown into the same testing regime. Kids who had mentally handicapped were thrown into the same testing regime. Distorted schools, punished the schools to try to raise them up to the standards. And here we stand with a No Child Left Behind that probably is slowly being put away through this new administration. They have a program called Race to the Top, which they're going to incentivize states, but with the additional money, I encourage them to try new methods, but that'll leave a lot of states out.
You were a teacher before you became a
long
political
time
worker.
ago. That's right.
Put yourself
a
back,
government elected representative.
Yes, now you are. Put yourself back in the classroom. Just imagine now you're a public school teacher and all of a sudden you're being graded on tests as opposed to other things that in your day that you were being graded on.
Yeah, and in the public school systems today, they have great challenges. I taught in a private parochial Christian school. And there's some differences, obviously. Usually in a parochial Christian school, you got 2 parents involved and watching, and in public school, they have to take all comers. Every socioeconomic area, all types of families, arrangements and stuff, it's just very, very difficult. In the perfect world, a teacher who has a kid entering their classroom wants each one of them to show improvement by the time they leave that classroom. And be able to say, you improved, you did learn. Now everybody's going to learn. Another thing is not everyone's going to learn at the same speed. Kids are going to mature at different times. Some kids, and I think one of the great benefits of teaching is when you have a kid who's not interested in learning, and is doing terrible, just holding a seat, but then something clicks, and then they start learning. Now that kid could be an F student and then finally becomes a C student. That's great progress. But in a standardized testing system where you're doing scores, you lose that personal touch, and you're dictated by scores.
Well, when I was in the Navy, we were glad to be out to sea because then we didn't have government people coming in to help us.
Right.
Perhaps that's the same thing in the education business, is that there is, quote, too much help coming in and not enough of teachers being allowed to be teachers.
Who's responsible for education in our country today?
Well, to me, it's you and me as parents.
It's the local, our parents being involved in education through the current system that's established today. Is you have local school boards who are elected by the people
Yes.
to set standards and manage the public institutions in their district. The states are supposed to be, by the Constitution, 51% of the funding of public education. They continue to spend less. Property tax rates keep going up to try to balance that budget. But federal government comes in, says we're going to give you some money. We only give them 1/10 of what we promised, and we bring all these new programs and say you got to do these. So I'm always one who says you got to get down, again, okay, swap military stories, Army infantry, you got to get down to the local level, to the individual squad leader or the platoon sergeant who's going to train and equip those men. It never helps when the battalion commander comes down and tries to interfere with small unit training, because that's not what he's an expert at.
And it's not his job.
It's not his job.
Stay out of there. So now that brings us to, I guess, your role as a congressman. Philosophically, what do you think that you're supposed to accomplish at the end of a career in Congress?
Oh,
I'm not talking about on a day-by-day basis.
I know,
I'm talking
it's
about
great.
Over a period of, I mean, you've been there since '96. You'll probably be there a few more years.
It should that you help preserve and defend the country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that the constitutional republic, as envisioned by the founding fathers, is still strong. If I walk away from public service and that's still true, then I could say, well, pretty good success. There are great challenges in all those, as you know. But part of my job is to, and what's happened in the public these days is a great debate. Defining the roles of the levels of government, make sure that their people are in their frame and they're doing A and not B. You know, the people are, people would like to see the national government do a lot of things, get involved in every aspect of everybody's lives, and you know, create peace in our time and redistribute wealth. But I don't think that was the intent of the founding fathers. The founding fathers really wanted, as you said, a union of states to defend the country and to create economic prosperity by creating a free trade zone, really within the continental United States.
Yeah, and we've gone far afield from that.
We have gone far afield. Well, I mean, people
there are defenders that we haven't gone far enough in making the changes. We are now in the Second Amendment debate again, okay? And now I'm talking, not you as the congressman, but I'm saying, and I wrote an article about this recently in which I said, okay, Mr. President, or Congress that want to change things, if you want to change the Second Amendment and its meaning, all you need is 2/3 of the House of Representatives, 2/3 of the Senate, 3/4 of the state legislatures to make that change. You can have it your way. Right. Until then, the fundamental law of the nation is this. Yeah. No, and yet, there are people who think that by legislation they may amend the Constitution.
It's always a teaching moment. The teaching moment right now is on the Bill of Rights, the history of the Bill of Rights, which were added to the Constitution because states weren't going to sign it unless these 10 amendments were added that guaranteed what? Personal, individual freedoms and liberties. Not some collective. They were afraid that individual rights were going to be usurped by this new Constitution.
Yes.
So they were enshrined in the first 10 amendments. So that's an easy way to talk about the Second Amendment. It wasn't some collective National Guard, Armory. It was for individuals. Lexington and Concord, go back to history. What was the assault weapon of the day was what? The musket.
Or the cannon.
Yes. Right. So it was very important for the militiamen to have a musket.
Right.
Because as the British were going up to seize stockpiles or destroy or
powder.
force
They came for the powder at Lexington.
that these folks were able to defend themselves and drive the British back.
Right.
It's a great story.
Right.
It's not one that we should continue to retell.
Well, it doesn't get told in schools. In the last 3-4 minutes that we have here, are you planning on moving up anyway? I know, here I'm asking the big question. Senator Durbin is up for re-election in 2014. Are you or any of your colleagues interested in stepping into the challenge of running against Senator Durbin?
That's a great question. I know of no member of the House who's expressed any interest to me or myself in running for the U.S. Senate.
Okay. Are you satisfied to be in Congress, or would you rather be in state government at some point in the future?
Well, state government is so screwed up. It's almost as screwed up as the national government. In fact, I think it's actually more screwed up.
The Illinois state government.
But with gerrymandering, make it very difficult for even a Republican to get elected in a House or a Senate seat and really have impact on governing. I mean, the Democrats control everything. So you never say never. But I would say that I love my job as a member of the House of Representatives. I love the People's House. I love the diversity. I love the debate. And as long as the folks from the new 15th District will send me back, I'm happy to go.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that there's going to be much progress during this 2-year period that you are elected to? And
you have to define progress. What's progress?
All right. Progress is people actually being not afraid that in their old age that they will be without the fundamentals of life because their money is becoming more and more or less and less valuable. That it takes more, and it doesn't even have to be the old. It could be even the young families that are just starting out who can't seem to see a way to have a life similar to what their parents or grandparents had not that many years ago.
Well, that's why many of us continue to stay in this debate, because do you want to have a constitutional republic? Do you want to have a country that's strong enough to defend itself and one that is able to create jobs? We want to inspire people to do their own savings. We don't want to continue to lay additional burdens on rules and regulations or taxation on personal savings. And we have to reform the entitlement program so that some of the promises we've made to our seniors are there. A lot of seniors, they'll come up to me and they're not really concerned about themselves, because we've said—
Right, they're not hurting. Right.
And they're really not concerned about their kids.
Mm-hmm.
They're concerned about their grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
And they are right to be concerned if we don't reform our fiscal position. The promises of this country that the next generation will have it better may not be able to be fulfilled.
And on that note—
happy note, huh?
Yeah, I don't want to go happy. It's not. I mean, you're concerned, I'm concerned. Right. And I thank you very much for coming and being as open and honest. There are some politicians who simply won't be open and honest when they're sitting in that chair. Thank you very much for being with us. And to my audience, I've been speaking with Congressman John Shimkus. He's with the 15th Congressional District, Illinois. Hope you enjoyed this. We're on YouTube. This will be on YouTube. Go show it to your friends if you want to see it again. Thank you.